Hello and welcome to this presentation on the Applied Research Business Project. If you have chosen to do an Applied Research Business Project for this course, this is the week that your final project write-up is due. So I thought what we do here is go through the rubric and the assignment instructions. Once you have finished writing up your business research project and the results, I always recommend go back over the assignment instructions. Obviously, you want to proofread your work, but if you go back over the assignment instructions, you can really tell if you've focused the sections on what is required. In addition, I'll go over the rubric since that's what your instructor, me, will be using to evaluate your work. So let's start with the assignment instructions. Okay, so this is the business project guidelines. There were some preliminary steps that you were supposed to do previous to starting this course. It tells us here that the project is to be written following proper APA formatting. In our library, you will find templates that you can use to set up your paper in proper APA formatting. It gives you the proper formatting for a title page with the running heads. It gives you proper formatting for the pages that follow with page headers. It shows you how to format the page numbers properly. Highly recommend going in there and checking that out if you haven't already. Okay, it tells us that your entire summary should be at least 15 to 20 pages, not including title or reference pages. So that means the body of your work. It should be 15 minimum pages. It's going to vary depending on the scope of the project and the supporting documents in your appendices, but all of that together should be at least 15 pages. But we don't want it to be more than 20 because then we are going on and on too much and not being concise enough. Also, it needs to be supported by 15 credible resources. Credible resources are not internet websites. Credible resources are articles you find in the library or books that you find in the library. So be sure you have done your research in the library. This will really come through in the literature review portion of your work if you have not. So what should be the first thing that I see? I should see an executive summary. Now, typically this is written last. So you'll probably write it this week since this is the week that your assignment is due, so everything should be pretty much polished by now. It should be about 1 page. It should just be a snapshot of your project. What are the highlights? If you were riding up an elevator with the CEO of your company and you had about 30 seconds to sell him on your idea or her on your idea, what would you say? That's basically what the executive summary is. It should be a page of the bare bones information that somebody needs, that an executive needs in order to make a decision about your project. Then your first section should be the introduction. And this is where you give us an overview of the project. It is important to note that you should not be telling us what the solution is. And I know this happens a lot of times. You get really excited about a program or a project or a form that's going to make life so much easier for you at work. Well, that's not what you want to tell us in the introduction. What you want to tell us about in the introduction is the problem. Why do you need this program? Why does the company need this new form? Why does it need to streamline this paperwork? What is the problem? So you give us a general description of the topic area. You should explain why it's relevant. Why is this an important problem to solve? And you want to identify the scope of your research interest. Now, scope is important because let's say you're coming up with a new form for everybody to use. It might not include certain departments of your company. So that would be one of the limits of your scope. It will not include information on the GH and F departments in our company. but it will include information on the ABC departments of our company. So you want to identify the specific scope. What is it you are going to look at as you research the problem? Again, not solution focused. What is the information you're going to look at, and what is the information you're not going to look at? Then you get to tell us what's happening in the company and why this project is needed. Okay, so up here you've been pretty general in talking about why this is a problem and how much of this you're planning to research. This tells us what's going on actually in your company. What's happening and why is it a problem? Why is this needed? So that is the introduction to your project. The second part is the literature review. Now this should be the biggest section of your paper, your write-up. It should be where you tell us about all the research you did in the library. Tell us about all the cool articles you found that really relate to your topic. Tell us why it's important, why this information is important to your project. How does this relate? For instance, if you were doing a new training project, you might have several articles on various training methods and maybe some articles on other companies that have revised training methods, but you're probably, don't want to include stuff that's like, okay, well, here's the best way to organize the workflow. Okay, that doesn't have anything to do with training. So you want to make sure the literature review is research that is closely related to the problem that you've identified in section 1. Okay. It's important that in the literature review, this is where the section that's most like a lot of the other papers you've written at school. It's where you go to the library, you find an article, you tell us what the research says and how it connects to your research. Okay. Do not discuss what's happening at your own company. That should have been done already in section 1. Do not tell us what you have done about the project. That's coming up in the next few sections. So all you're telling us here is what the research was you did to get background on your work. Okay. You want to show in this section that you are familiar with the research that's been done in this area and that you've found like a gap or a place where more information is needed. If you're looking for things still to include, look at theoretical approaches to your topic, dominant debates in your topic, research designs that have been used to understand your topic. Okay, so again, this should be the biggest part of your paper. This is where I should see the majority of your 15 plus credible library resources discussed. Okay, then you go to section 3, which is the methodological design. Okay, this tells us how you designed your research. Again, we do not hear anything about the solution. We are only hearing now about how you approached your research. How did you set this up? Okay, you want to identify what type of research design you use. Tell us how you access the information. Tell us how long the time frame was for your research, how you recorded your observations and information, how you coded the data. Okay, did you start with already established research categories when you were coding the data? Or did you look for the data itself to identify the categories? Okay, so this is all about the research process. Then you get to tell us how the research process went in section 4, the application and analysis. Okay, this tells us the results of your research. If you identified that you were going to use quantitative or qualitative, that's fine. But in the results section, everything should be related back to the methods you said you were going to use in that previous section. So it's like if you said, I'm going to use case studies as my methodological design, in here you should tell us what the results were of that case study, what the data was you got from it, when you told us how you were going to code the case study, here's when you tell us what you got, got in those separate categories. Okay. You also want to make sure that you are addressing any information regarding financial, marketing, or communications, internal or external, regulatory or legal aspects. Okay, those are your 3 appendices. So we want to see those topics addressed in your research. Then finally, summary recommendations. This is where I think most students have the easiest time because this is where you get to give us your recommendation. This is where you tell us about the answer to the problem. The thing is, your answer to the problem needs to be supported by the analysis you conducted in the previous section, in the results section. And it should also connect back to the literature review. You know, how does this connect to the research already done? You also want to include a future implications section. You know, what more do you need to do in terms of researching this project? What are some new ideas to see that could impact the project? So that's in the body of your paper. Again, be sure you use APA for all the references cited and on your reference list. It's not a works cited list. It's a reference list. It's not a resources list. It's a reference list. Hint, hint, hint. So there's 3 required appendices. Appendix A should talk about should support your discussion of the financial aspects that you talked about back here in the results section. Okay. Appendix B should support whatever information you shared with us back here in terms of marketing or communication. Appendix C is where you talk about government legal regulations, or if there's company regulations that are impacting your project. This is where you add all that. So you tell us about it in this section 4. In the application and analysis section, you tell us about finance, marketing, communications, and the regulatory or legal aspects. In the appendices, you give us all these supporting documents that show why your discussion in the paper was important. So anyway, that would be what would be expected of you. I recommend that once you feel you have finalized your paper, that you go and you look at the instructions to make sure you have all of these comments. And I also recommend going to the rubric. So here we are at the rubric. So you're going to want to make sure that you have demonstrated an understanding of the facts, you present a cogent analysis, you have an overarching perspective of the concepts and the issues. So this is where you really want to make sure that you're showing your analytical skills. Then you have a section on financial cost, communication and marketing, and legal ethical strategy. These 3 sections refer to these topics, which we mentioned in the application and analysis section, the 4th section of your work, and it refers to the appendices. You want to make sure that in Appendix A and Appendix B and Appendix C, you have the documents that support your points on these 3 topics. We're going to want to make sure that you use appropriate language for your audience. If this is a summary intended to go to senior managers, you don't want to be talking to them like they are your friends at the lunch table. The executive summary, again, should be clear and concise. Remember, just a page, just the main points of your project. Needs to follow proper APA. When it talks about voice here, it recommends using active voice. Okay, so rather than say he does need to understand, say something like he understands, or instead of he does understand, he understands. You want to have a professional tone, and you want to proofread. Make sure that you have the right sources, the right evidence, the 15 minimum resources, that they're formatted correctly, and that you don't have a lot of mistakes in your paper. So that is what we'll be looking for in your final project write-up. Please let me know if you have any questions.